What's going on, everybody? Anthony Cervino here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel with my top buy, sell, and hold candidates going into NFL Week 5. We're going to get started with Garret Wilson. And Garret Wilson, we drafted him late in the first round, and he has yet to live up to expectations. He's given us under 14.3 PPR points in every game this season, and last week against the Broncos, very tough matchup against Patrick Surtain Jr. He was shut down, 5 of 8 targets for 41 yards. Right now, it is not looking good for Garret Wilson, but things will get better. Now is the time to buy, and I'm going to tell you why. His matchups are going to get softer. You got Minnesota coming up. On paper, they are giving up a ton of fantasy points to the wide receiver position. That could be a hit or miss matchup. And then Buffalo. Buffalo is the second toughest matchup for enemy wideouts in fantasy football. Then Pittsburgh. So why are we buying Garret Wilson now? Because once week 8 hits, the floodgates will open with matchups against the Patriots, the Texans, the Cardinals, the Colts, going into the Jets Week 12 bye. A lot of great matchups upcoming. And some fantasy managers of Garret Wilson, they might not see what's on the horizon. They might just see Garret Wilson, hey, whether it's Aaron Rodgers, Tim Boyle, or Zach Wilson, this is what we're going to get out of Garret Wilson. But we know Garret Wilson has the pedigree of a superstar, and it's only a matter of time before it begins to pop. The usage is there, folks. He is being targeted on 31% of his routes run. He has 25.6% of his team targets, 34.2% of his team's air yards. It's only a matter of time, which is why now is the time to buy low on the talent and ceiling of Garret Wilson. Let's go to my next buy, and this is another superstar player. These buy low windows do not stay open for long, and now it's Bijan Robinson, folks. And what do we know about Bijan Robinson? Some of us drafted him with the top 5 pick. He was certainly one of the top 3 running backs off the board. But this is another player who is not living up to his draft position. Bijan Robinson under 16.2 PPR points in every game. And last week against the New Orleans Saints, he barely managed any touches. He only had 11 touches in that game. 28 yards rushing, 4 for 46 as a receiver. This is not why we drafted Bijan Robinson, but what do we know? He could have been dealing with that hamstring injury, because on the Monday injury report, he is showing that he's managing the aforementioned hamstring injury, and he was a limited participant. Why is there a buy low window open for Bijan Robinson? Because similar to last season, where many, including myself, including you, felt that Bijan Robinson underperformed and wasn't getting used right under Arthur Smith. Well, new year, new offensive coordinator, same result. We're not getting that elite production, but it's going to happen. And I believe it happens as soon as this week. So this buy low window is probably a few days old, because the upcoming matchups for Bijan Robinson, talk about a gauntlet of outstanding matchups. Tampa Bay, Carolina, Seattle, Tampa Bay again, Dallas. That run right there from weeks 5 to week 9, that should jumpstart the fantasy football production of Bijan Robinson. Bijan, he's getting it done. He's just not getting it done enough. When it comes to his usage as a receiver, he is averaging 10.6 yards after the catch. He has a 93.8% catch rate, 2.11 average yards per route run. He is targeted on 25% of his routes and has 14.3% of his targets. Not to mention how outstanding he is when it comes to his running back metrics, 17 and a half touches per game, a 20% broken tackle rate, an 80% positive run rate. It's all there for Bijan Robinson. Where he needs to begin cashing in is in the touchdown department. He only has 1 touchdown this season. That needs to improve. But he is only, to his credit, he only has 5 total red zone rushes and 1 total red zone target. He needs to be used more in the money zone. And if that happens, I think the sky's the limit for Bijan Robinson. Let's go to my final buy low, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, coming off of a pretty pedestrian game for Jalen Hurts. He did not look good. He lost a fumble in this matchup, and this was a matchup where Lane Johnson did not play. We know how valuable Lane Johnson is, not only to the Philadelphia Eagles when it comes to winning football games, but also to protect Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, one of the top quarterbacks off the board, back-to-back games, under 19.9 quarterback points, depending on where you play. But let's not forget, to open up the regular season, 25.2 and 27.7. So what's the difference? What are we missing from the Jalen Hurts equation? Well, A.J. Brown has missed a few games. Devonta Smith missed last week. Jalen is missing his 2 elite pass-catching weapons. Of course, we're going to see a drop in his production. Jalen Hurts is also not running as well as he did earlier this year. Back-to-back games, only 8 carries and under 25 yards rushing. He only scored 1 touchdown in this 2-game period. But it's all there. Once A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith return, Jalen Hurts is going to get back on track. I believe, and so should you, in what Kellen Moore has brought to this offense. We saw it through the first 2 games before the injuries. This offense is a juggernaut. We know that Saquon Barkley, yeah, I get it. He's going to eat into some of those goal line opportunities for Jalen Hurts, but Saquon is also a receiver out of the backfield. He pads Jalen Hurts' stats. When Jalen Hurts throws Saquon the football, he catches touchdowns, which also pads Jalen Hurts' stats. Philly has their bye in week 5. If there was ever a buy now window for Jalen Hurts, it is now, because we could assume that coming out of the bye when Philly gets the Cleveland Browns, it's going to be a healthy arsenal of pass-catching weapons for Jalen Hurts. Go get him now while you can. And remember, if you like videos just like this, hit the like button below, hit the subscribe button and the alert icon so you can be notified anytime we go live to answer your questions or drop videos just like this. Sell candidates. And one player we should sell now is Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk started off slow, really slow. 7 targets for the first 2 games. He finally got it going. This is a bad offense, but against Buffalo, Christian Kirk got going. He saw 10 targets, hauled in 8 for 79, 15.9 PPR points. Last week against Houston, a more competitive game, 7 of 12 targets, 61 yards and a touchdown, 19.1 PPR points. The upcoming matchups for Christian Kirk, they're outstanding. If you are a fantasy manager and drafted Christian Kirk, you're feeling pretty good right now. But what we have to remember, this is not the Christian Kirk show only anymore. There's a guy named Brian Thomas. He's a rookie. He's played outstanding. He's given us a high floor in all 4 games played, at least 9.8 PPR points. That's his floor, and at least 11.4 the other 3, including a career best 21.9 PPR points last week against Houston. Kirk wasn't the only one seeing an uptick in targets in back-to-back games. Brian Thomas, season-high 9 targets in each of the past 2 games. He is putting up the yards. He is finding the end zone. He is doing it all. And Brian Thomas, you can make the case, he is the wide receiver you want from the Jacksonville Jaguars moving forward, which means the buy or the sell now window is here for Christian Kirk. He's coming off a couple of pop games where the usage is there, the volume is there, the production is there. And now if you look, he has outstanding matchups upcoming. If you're ever going to get a premium return on Christian Kirk, the time is now. Because there's some fantasy football managers sitting out there. They just lost Rashee Rice. They're in panic mode. They might give up the farm to acquire a player like Christian Kirk, and you're sitting on him. If you have the wide receiver depth to move off of Kirk and sell and get a premium return, maybe you need to bolster your running back position. You can use Christian Kirk, flip him, get a monster upgrade at running back, and still feel safe at wide receiver. Move off from Christian Kirk while you can. Finally, a running back we are selling, and that's Chuba Hubbard. Well, Chuba Hubbard's playing outstanding football right now. 3 straight games, 11.6 PPR points, including back-to-back games over 22. He is doing it all. He is getting the touches, over 100 yards rushing in back-to-back games, at least 4 targets in 3 straight games, scoring a touchdown in back-to-back games. Literally, the goal line work for this guy. He has 9 red zone touches in total in the past 2 games and had 5 rushes inside the 5 last week. Why are we selling Chuba Hubbard? Because Jonathan Brooks eventually, we believe, if we believe the reports, is going to return. Now, as of September 30th, reading the news on RotoWire.com, the practice window has yet to open for Jonathan Brooks. But we're getting close. And when Jonathan Brooks does return, it's okay to believe that he's going to eat into Chuba Hubbard's workload, because Chuba Hubbard is still conceding touches right now to Miles Sanders. And Jonathan Brooks is the future of this team. Now, I do see a world where both Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks are going to coexist, and we're going to see a 60-40, 50-50 snap share, which is why if you need to upgrade another position, Chuba Hubbard, sell him now. Because there's also a world where Jonathan Brooks, who came into this NFL draft highly coveted, highly touted, might be the best runner in this draft. There's a chance he also heavily cuts into Chuba Hubbard's workload. And the matchups are going to get a little bit tougher for the Panthers, right? Because Chuba against the Raiders and Cincy, really good matchups. And then you get the Bears this week. Very good secondary, leaky front 7, but that can tighten up anytime, especially that's a game being played in Chicago. Atlanta Falcons in week 6, they're a really tough matchup. Washington, they look like a team that's getting better. Denver, New Orleans, the Giants, bye week, KC. It's going to get really tough for Chuba Hubbard and this Panthers offense. Sell him now, coming off of these monster games, and you could potentially get a big-time return for Chuba Hubbard. Let's close this out. 2 players we should hold, one of which is Tyreek Hill. Why do we hold Tyreek Hill? He is coming off 3 straight games with fewer than 4 receptions and fewer than 40 receiving yards. Fewer than 7 targets, not finding the end zone. So what are we doing with Tyreek Hill, who's not producing in fantasy? We drafted him as a top 5 or better player. We have to hold him because nobody in their right mind is going to give us fair value for Tyreek Hill. And if you watch the broadcast of the Monday Night Football game, there was a report suggesting that Tua could return as soon as week 8, which means there is some thing to grab onto if you're a Tyreek Hill or a Jalen Waddle or a Devin Achane fantasy manager. Because right now, whether it's Hill or any of these other outstanding fantasy assets on the Dolphins, you can't sell them for fair value. You're not going to get it. They're not giving you the production. It's hard to even start them in our fantasy lineups. As crazy it is, I've been telling people to sit Tyreek and Waddle. The quarterback position is not good, whether it's Skylar Thompson, whether it's Huntley, and Mike McDaniel. You heard it from himself. He needs to do a better job putting his team in a position to succeed, and it's not happening right now. And the schedule, Pats, bye. If there's a shot that Tua comes back following the week 6 bye, the skies open up, the Red Sea parts, you got Indy and Arizona, 2 outstanding matchups. And if you're a Tyreek Hill fantasy manager, you're in really good shape. I would just hold on to him and try to ride the wave rather than selling him at a massive discount. One more player we're holding, Brandon Aiyuk. He's really frustrating. He has had 3 games this year with 5 targets only. Now, last week against the Rams, he saw 10, didn't really do much with them. 5 for a scoreless 48 yards back in week 3. And that was a game where Kittle and Debo were sidelined. This was a cake matchup against New England. And we still did not get that pop game we're waiting for from Brandon Aiyuk. Now, we know the story at Aiyuk. He was a holdout. He was a problem. They get him signed, and he has yet to do anything for the 49ers or from a fantasy football perspective. However, this is another player that if we go to try to trade him, we're not going to get fair value. And players like this, where we're not going to get fair value, we certainly can't drop him. You need to sit there. You need to ride the wave. There's a lot of volatility in this 49ers offense, injuries, players coming in and out. It is only a matter of time for Brandon Aiyuk to get going. In theory, we've seen it year after year that he's been in the NFL. So if you're a Brandon Aiyuk fantasy manager and you can afford to, let's say if you're winning, you've been winning without anything from him. Sit on him until he gets going again. If somebody is willing to give you fair market value, fine, move them. But in most cases, nobody is giving you fair market value for an expensive wide receiver that has yet to give us north of 9.8 PPR points in a single game this year. We are holding Brandon Aiyuk.